Well, with the mass departure of state premiers last year, Mark McGowan in WA, Daniel Andrews in Victoria, Dominic Perrottet in New South Wales, Anastasia Palaszczuk in Queensland. Oh, I've got to draw a breath now. Can you believe Peter Malinauskas in South Australia is now the longest currently serving premier in the country? Well, ahead of his third year in the job, Mr Malinauskas joins me now. Premier, welcome to the program.
Thanks very much, Caleb.
What do you think it says about the state of Australian politics that not even 2 full years into the job, you are now the longest serving sitting premier?
Oh, look, I think it's just one of the quirks of the system, Caleb. You know, as you know, in our federation, elections are scattered, particularly amongst the states. And I think we've had a bit of a change in leadership around the country. In the case of Mark McGowan, Anastasia Palaszczuk and Dan Andrews, they've all had the ability to be able to choose the timing of their own exits, which I think is to their great credit. So it is a bit peculiar to have someone who's only been in the job for less than 2 years as the longest serving premier, but there's so many challenges that we've got around the country, and the injection of some new faces around the National Cabinet table hopefully serves the country well.
Well, you're pushing ahead this year with a state-based voice to Parliament. I think the first elections are due to be held in the coming months. Do you believe you still have public support for this, given not a single South Australian electorate voted in favour of the federal voice proposal?
Well, I think at the core of the question and the proposition, of course, Caleb, is that what we're doing here in South Australia is fundamentally different to what was being proposed at a federal level in the form of the referendum. Of course, the question that was put before Australians last year was, should we change the Constitution? And so much of the contention around the national voice was whether or not that should be enshrined in a constitutional change. In fact, there were no shortage of Conservatives at various points along the debate who are arguing that they support the concept of a voice provided it is established in some other form outside of the Constitution, which is what we've done here in South Australia. We went to our election in March less than 2 years ago on a bipartisan platform with the Liberal Party here in South Australia proposing a voice to the Parliament that is not enshrined in the Constitution. So that's what we're delivering. It's different by nature. In the event, in a way that I hope doesn't occur, in the event that for whatever reason people see the state-based voice as not living up to its mandate or living up to its responsibilities, it is subject to change by virtue of the fact that it is not constitutionally enshrined. So that fundamental difference is something that I don't think is lost on the South Australian people, and we hope what we're doing here in the state can actually result in some practical change to see the very heavy investment that is made in Aboriginal affairs actually delivers more outcomes when it comes to closing the gap and other key metrics.
I mean, it's not in the Constitution, so it can effectively be abolished or changed, as you say, but would it not be a very brave government that either tried to get rid of or tinker with a voice to Parliament once it exists?
Oh, look, as you know, Caleb, in state parliaments like the federal parliament, legislation is amended and changed all the time to reflect the needs of the community, to reflect various changes in our society. And I imagine in due course this may be no different. But let's try it first and see how it plays out. I mean, from my perspective, I'm very aware of the fact that we do invest a lot of money into Aboriginal affairs. We do it with the aspiration to lift people up, and it hasn't happened with the degree of success that most Australians aspire to. And if the voice can help formulate policy to get us a better outcome for Aboriginal people, but also for taxpayers, then I'm willing to explore the idea. But it is flexible. It could change into the future, which is why I think it is so different to what was proposed at the federal referendum in 2023.
When your government was elected in March 2022, you declared that Labor was the only party with a credible plan to fix the ramping crisis. But last month, SA recorded its worst ever ramping figures, a record 4,285 hours. A man died on the 27th after waiting 10 hours for an ambulance. Have you lost control of the health system?
No, but I think the incident that occurred on the 27th of December is just a very powerful, in fact, it's a very tragic reminder about why ambulance response times matter, Caleb. When someone calls 000, they're doing it on behalf of a family member that might be in dire need or themselves. And people expect in a first world country that when you make that call, the ambulance rolls up on time. Now, if you go back to the beginning of 2022, this time 2 years ago, for lights and sirens emergencies, things like a cardiac arrest, for instance, in South Australia, the ambulance 2 out of 3 times was rolling up late. 2 out of 3 times by the basic national standard. We've been able to improve that so that now that over 70% as of the last few weeks, and we've had a bit of a trend upwards here over a sustained period, over 70% of the ambulances are rolling up on time in comparison to 36%. Now that's a dramatic improvement in the case in over 2 years. But what is residual and has proven to be a challenge, and one that we remain committed to addressing, is reducing the number of hours that ambulances find themselves stuck on the ramp at a hospital. What we said is we want to reduce ramping so that we can get ambulances rolling up on time. We've been able to do the latter, but we've still got a lot of work to do in respect to the former, and that's something we remain committed to. The challenge, of course, goes to bed capacity in the system. We made a number of investments in our first state budget, and we will see those start to materialise with new beds in our hospitals available towards the end of this year. It takes time to build them, and that's as frustrating to me as much as anybody, but we have got a plan, and that's what we're executing.
I mean, it's great that ambulances are rocking up earlier than they otherwise would have done, but you've still got people, once they get to the hospital, sitting there in ambulances for longer and longer periods of time waiting to get in the front door. So, sure, they've got someone there that can provide some level of care, but they're not getting the level of care that they ought to be getting in the hospital. It's the worst it's ever been. I mean, how can you... I know you say we've got a plan. Well, why isn't it working?
Well, because, Caleb, the plan is about putting more beds into our hospitals. Now, you would well appreciate that if you make a decision in the 2022 state budget, which we did 8 weeks after being elected, to fund the construction of more capacity in our hospital system, you don't make the decision in June and July wake up and find out that miraculously overnight a new wing of a hospital has been built. It takes time to design, it takes time to construct, the model of care for the particular beds has to be developed, and then of course you have to recruit the nurses and doctors who are going to look after the patients who go into those beds. Now that takes time, and we have been working overtime to deliver that as expeditiously as possible. And so in the second half of this year, we start to see that come to fruition. We've got over 150 beds, new beds, coming into the system in the second half of the year, and then another 130 beds coming next calendar year. And for the benefit of your interstate viewers, that is a substantial increase in capacity in the South Australian hospital system, which we expect to make a difference. But it's also true we've got more ambulances out on the road today than what was the case 2 years ago, because we've been able to acquire those ambulances more expeditiously. We've been able to recruit ambos quicker than doctors. And that is making a material difference to the extent that we've actually got more ambulances on the road and more ambulances spending less time on the ramp. But for the ambos that do get stuck there, it tends to be for a period that is unacceptable to me and to the South Australian public, and that's what we continue to work on.
Just very quickly, Premier, we've only got 30 seconds, but there are persistent rumours that you could be parachuted into federal politics at some point and even be a potential leader. Can you rule out ever making a tilt at federal politics?
I can, Caleb. I'm wholeheartedly committed to this job. My wife and I have just been lucky enough to have our fourth child. We've got an infant at home, and doing this job is hard enough with those trying to balance family life as well. So I feel very fortunate to have this privilege, this awesome responsibility of leading a state that is got the fastest growing economy in the nation at the moment. And that is something that I wholeheartedly enjoy and is the only thing I'm committed to.
All right, we'll put that one in the bank if we ever need to come back to it. South Australian Premier Peter Malinauskas, thank you so much for your time.